Welcome to Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
Yep, and I am the other half of the Dit and brothers. I'm Quin, K8QS, and we've got a great question here, Tom. How does wire size affect HF antenna performance? The size of the wire. You know, when hams discuss wire gauge, often we say AWG for HF antennas. The debate often focuses on finding the perfect balance between electrical efficiency and mechanical or physical reality.
Well, the short answer is this. On the HF bands, changing the wire size makes, a negligible difference in electrical performance, but it makes a massive difference in mechanical performance and power handling. Here's exactly how the thickness of the antenna wire affects your signal, your bandwidth, and your installation.
Okay, number one, let's talk about bandwidth. Bandwidth. This is the fat wire effect. In antenna physics, the bandwidth of an antenna, that's how wide of a frequency range it can cover. Let's say if you're on 40 meters, can you cover the whole band with your antenna without a massive SWR, the bandwidth? Before the SWR gets unacceptably high, it is influenced by the diameter or the thickness of the wire. A thicker element lowers the antenna's what we call the Q factor, the ratio of energy stored to energy dissipated per cycle. I know that's kind of complicated, but just think of it this way. It's going to change the bandwidth. If the smaller the wire, the less you'll be able to operate more broadly. So the reality on HF, while true in theory, the difference between standard wire gauges, like let's say 18 or 12, like you might use around your house, is so microscopically small compared to HF wavelengths, like 40 or 80 meters, that you won't notice any practical difference in SWR bandwidth. To actually gain noticeable bandwidth on lower bands, you have to increase the diameter drastically, which is why hams build these cage dipoles, these multiple wires held together by hoops, or they use thick aluminum tubing, which you can actually do on any band. You know, you can make a dipole, let's say, that's a rotatable dipole with tubing that will have some great bandwidth to it.
Right. Probably the most noticeable thing, though, is the RF resistance and the skin effect. And at radio frequencies, alternating current, which is RF, doesn't travel through the entire cross-section of the wire like DC power does. Because of the skin effect, RF energy travels almost entirely on the outer surface of the conductor. So the thicker the wire has more surface area, which means lower RF resistance. However, standard half-wave dipole has a feed point impedance of roughly 73 ohms. The difference in RF resistance between thin 18-gauge wire and thick 12-gauge wire might only be a fraction of an ohm when compared to the 73 ohm radiation resistance. The efficiency loss using thinner wire is virtually undetectable on the air.
Yeah, that's why when I was in the dorm room at the university and I set up my station there and I used that bell wire going out to the tree, I figured it's not going to make a big difference that it's not very thick wire. I could hardly see the wire, and nobody did for the whole semester I was there. The third factor is power handling, okay, or we could say QRO, high power, versus QRP, low power. Because thinner wire has slightly higher RF resistance, it must dissipate more of your transmit power as heat. Well, 100 watts or less, you can use extremely thin wire. We're talking about 22 gauge or 24 gauge, even 26 gauge poly stealth wire without any fear of it melting, and people doing all of the POTA stuff, and I'll do this all the time. But when you get up to the legal limit, 1500 watts, pushing 1500 watts into 26 gauge wire can cause the wire to heat up significantly, potentially melting the insulation if you have insulation on it, or physically snapping the wire under tension. If you run a high power amplifier, you should stick to 12 or 14 gauge.
Hey, Quin, what do you call 1500 watts running through 28 gauge wire?
A disaster.
A fuse.
It is.
Yeah.
That's good.
Mechanical strength and sag. That's called catenary sag. You see it in the telephone lines and power lines. It's a real thing. This is where wire size actually dictates your antenna's performance. You have to balance the breaking strength against the weight of the wire. Thick wires, 10 and 12 gauge, are very strong, handle ice and wind well, but it's heavy. The sheer weight of the wire means that they'll sag heavily in the middle, requiring massive tension on the end supports and heavy duty center insulation.
It's an
Thin wire,
insulator.
Right, or insulator. Thinner wire, 18 to 26 gauge, the real thin stuff, is extremely lightweight. It can be pulled perfectly taut with minimum tension to a certain level, meaning you can hang it from thin tree branches, lightweight telescoping fiberglass poles, which are ideal for parks on the air or portable operation. However, it's prone to snapping under ice loads, falling branches, or high winds.
Exactly, Tom. So let's summarize this a little bit here. The best wire choices for HF. If you've got a permanent base station, 14 gauge stranded copper clad steel, copper weld it's called. Stuff is hard to work with. I hate working with it. But it provides immense tensile strength, so you won't stretch or snap it in ice storms, while the copper skin carries the RF efficiently. For portable, we're talking about POTA, SOTA, and all the other OTAs, 20 to 22 gauge stranded silicone insulated wires. It's incredibly flexible. It won't kink on you when it's rolled up in the backpack, and it weighs practically nothing, so go for it. Now, what about for stealth, like I talked about with my dorm room? Here, and a lot of HOA installations too, you want something like 26 gauge poly stealth wire. It's functionally invisible against the sky. I just read somewhere a guy that actually paints his poly stealth wire a particular color. From a few yards away, you can't see it. It's easily handling a 100-watt transceiver while keeping the transceiver happy. So those are some considerations. It's not the end all, the be all, the alpha and the omega of wire antennas, but you got to consider it. And Tom, I go back to this point with the wire. I don't like to have long antennas out there from tree to tree without any support in the middle.
Right.
So I much prefer things like center fed antennas where I can hoist it up in the center where the weight is, where I've got the or the balun, as well as the weight of the tire, the wire, and then the sides going down are not going to be too heavy. And I let them droop on the sides, and I don't think it makes much of a difference at all, certainly not on SWR. So we hope we've offered some wisdom for you on wire size and making these wire antennas on HF. This is Ham Radio Perspectives. We're trying to serve you. My name's Quin, K8QS.
I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, let us know what topics you have. 73, everybody.